So, hey everyone, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the series premiere of DIY Data with Trifacta. I'm Steve Mitchell. I'll be the host for this first episode. I'm one of the strategic account managers here at Trifacta, and I'm joined by Misagh Jebeli, who is one of our senior data engineers and will also be leading us through the technical portions of today. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Trifacta, we are the data engineering cloud, and we are the only open and interactive cloud platform for data engineers and analysts to collaboratively profile, prepare, and pipeline data for analytics and machine learning. So today's episode is going to be focused on doing or creating data workflows within the modern data stack. Misagh is going to take us through a short intros to what the modern data stack is and what are some considerations before you start working with it. But just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions, if you look down at the bottom right of the Zoom window, there will be a Q&A button which you can hit, and then you can fire away any questions or anything like that throughout the session. And we'll handle those towards the end of today's presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Misagh with an intro to the modern data stack and some of his experiences with it.
Thank you, Steve. Glad to be here. So I've been in the BI field for about 13 to 14 years. And when I started early on, the landscape of the analytics world was really different. It was really hard to get it started, and it was mostly because of the infrastructure. You had to have your network administrator or DBAs and sign a really big contract to actually get the infrastructure going. And then there was a shift in the market with cloud data engineering and all these cloud warehouses such as BigQuery, Snowflake. They just made it so easy. With one click, suddenly all your infrastructure is taken care of, and it scales on demand. Another big thing was, when you're looking back, it was really hard to ingest data. We had to actually write codes, hit the source tables, and then extract data and put it into our target system. And we were causing a lot of performance issue, and the code wasn't right. We didn't know which one was modified, which one wasn't. And then it came the mainstream idea of change data capture and tools such as Fivetran and other change data capture toolings. So it really made it easy going from needing a huge team of 20 people and then taking 7 to 8 months just to build your infrastructure to a team of 2 people and timeline of 4 to 6 months. My last job was at Inhabit IQ, and we had the 3 V's of the data. We had a lot of variety of the data. We were ingesting data from 100 sources, and it took us 3-4 months to build the system. So we used Fivetran to bring data into Snowflake, and then we were reading the data with Trifacta from Snowflake, cleaning it, and then getting ready for downstream analytics. So I saw this shift in the market around 2016, 17 that instead of systems taking years to build and to get to the value, it was taking like a few months, and then the data was ready to be presented to the business people.
Mm-hmm. So let's actually back up a little bit. So this is ultimately where everybody wants to be. This is where we want to end up, is with a modern data stack, so that we don't have to worry about infrastructure. We can focus on what we're doing with data today. But maybe we should back up a little bit and look at what is the current state for a lot of businesses today within their own organizations. How are they trying to do this, and how are they also trying to manage the people aspect? Like, how do people collaborate when they start working with an environment like this? So most organizations, you'll find that there's a bit of a rift or separation between line of business teams and between IT, where IT has certain responsibilities and they also own a significant amount of the infrastructure in the modern data stack. But then you also have, the line of business team is where the domain knowledge is. So people who actually know what's going on within the data and how it affects the business. And you usually have a lot of interplay going backwards and forwards between these two teams. The way we used to do it in the past was requirements would be defined in the business side. Those would then be built together with IT. IT would then spend some time investing and building different data structures. They'd then go back to the business to present the results. And sometimes we would find that the goalposts have changed. And so if we keep moving forward, Misagh, we'll see the problem is that there's a lot of time spent and lost going backwards and forwards between these two teams, where, quite simply, it's just maybe a misunderstanding of what people meant in the first place. And so we've got these incredibly powerful tools where, we don't have the best way to collaborate between these two audiences. And so if we keep going forward, ultimately, what we're trying to get to is we're trying to get to a place where we bring these two audiences who may have different priorities, where the business is really, really big on ease of use. They want to be able to do things themselves. And so inevitably people fall into things like using Excel or using a visualization tool to try and prepare their data. Whereas IT was more concerned about governance. They're worried about where is all this data going? How are people processing data on their local laptops, people working remotely? Is it going to be fast enough if you have to download things on your home internet connection? How do we actually get that scalability and speed and security that someone in IT ultimately needs? And so this is really where the modern data stack is helping, and how Trifacta is gluing together all these different audiences. We've got data analysts who are usually on the business side, data scientists who are complementing the business, and then we've got our data engineers in IT who are actually productionizing and making everything that the business builds scalable and secure in a manner that's actually good for the business and isn't going to put them foul of regulations or open up any kind of risk. So ultimately, modern data stack, what do we want? We want IT needs to have scalable, native, cloud-friendly technology that's easy to own and easy to manage. And then on the business side, we need to actually have tools that anyone in the business can pick up and start working with and actually be able to collaborate with other parts of the business. Because really, to a degree, everyone is now technical. Everyone knows how to use different tools. Everybody is using apps within their phones, on their desktops. And so people want to be able to do things on their own and not always have to defer to someone else. And so this is really where Trifacta is different in the market. We allow these two different audiences of people to be able to collaborate much better and much more efficiently than has been done in the past. So with that said, I think at this point, let's actually see this in action. Let's actually see what it's like to use something like Trifacta in a real world scenario where we're going to explore some data, we're going to do some cleaning up, and then we're going to see what the results are. So over to you, Misagh.
Thank you, Steve. So as I mentioned, I personally build data warehouses and centralized data with Snowflake, Fivetran, and Trifacta. And I use Trifacta as my transform in ELT. So, when the data lands, I use Trifacta to explore and understand the data and then build and prep the data for downstream analytics. For today's demo, I actually found a really fun data set on Kaggle.com. It's about Olympics. So it actually has every athlete that competed in the Olympics for the past 120 years. So it has information about their name, which country they represented, and then where was the Olympics and if they won anything. So I always had these questions about how popular has Olympic been over the years. So we want to do some sort of trending analysis, and hopefully by the end of the session, we would be able to answer how popular was Olympics back in the days and how it is today.
So we could do breakdowns of male and female participation.
Yeah, I also want to jump in because, human mind is curious. You give it one clue and then suddenly you want to know a lot more details and break it down. So I got that data set from Kaggle and I put it on the S3 drive. So I'm connecting to my S3 and I'm bringing that data set, but you could connect to all relational systems, file systems, applications, and let's go ahead and look at that file. So I'm switching to my recipe view, and here it's going to give me a sample of the data. And right away, it's giving me some analytics about what is in this data set. So as I'm looking in this data, uh, very early on, I see the column 6, and I'm looking at it. 74% of people already in the sample data set are males versus females. So we can actually go dig deeper into it in the future. Another thing I'm seeing is the column age. I see a lot of mismatches or columns that are not actually integer, and I can dig deeper into it and see what's happening. So I see that age, a lot of NA, and when I'm looking at the data, I see these are like older Olympics. Maybe they didn't have good data collection mechanism back then. But as you see on the right, Trifacta AI engine is actually giving me suggestions and it's telling me what to do with the data. And it even gives me a preview of what's going to happen. So one of the first ones is like, do you want to set this one to null? And I'm like, sure, yes, let's go do that. And as you can see, now my age column, we went from mismatch and we set them to null. I'm looking more at the data and I'm seeing city, but I don't have any country. And for this analysis, I wanted to know where each Olympic was. So I went ahead and I found another data set that actually has data about Olympics, where it was conducted, and I brought it in. I wanted to use it as a lookup table.
So you're gonna, so based on that data set, you kind of come in, you've never seen it before, you can actually explore and profile everything, so you know where you should be spending your time, and straight away it's, you know, okay, we actually need some more data here because there's some gaps in the knowledge. So now you can actually go and do a lookup and pull in some more information.
True. So I got lucky. I found a really good data set that has information about the Olympics. So has the location, which was the season and the year, and the date. But looking at the dates, this file is not really clean. I'm missing, right away it tells me year is missing, ceremony is missing, and I'm clicking on the ceremony missing, and I think we don't have 1916 data.
So I think 1916 and 1940, those were the two world wars. So it's likely that they never held those events, or they just delayed them.
True. I'll take your word for it. I don't remember. So I'm going to delete. So you see, so Trifacta is suggesting that, hey, do you want to delete it wherever open ceremony is missing? And I'm just going to pick it, yes. And we filter out the data. Another thing I'm seeing is my column year. So I'm missing some years for some reason. Let's explore and see what is happening. Sorry. So I'm looking here, and I think what's happening, they're giving me one row for each season. So in 1924, I think this is the row for winter. And then they left the year for the summer blank, thinking that, hey, you would go figure it out on your own. So we could do that in Trifacta, actually. So I'm going back to my recipes, and I'm going to look for a function that they have built in called fill. And I'm going to say, as you can see, I don't know much about this. So I'll get a guide of what parameters does this function need. So I'm going to give it my column. I'm going to say, go one row back and fill the data for me. And let's look at the preview. And I think it's asking me to do a sort. So I'm going to do sorted by the original source row. So as you can see, the preview looks correct now. So I filled the missing year with the previous row missing year.
So it's going in a sequential order and saying, okay, if we hit an empty field in this column, go back one row, use that value as a default, and then basically populate it in that way.
Correct. So I went ahead and generated the year column with all the data in there. Now, we're looking at this date, and for some reason, our month and day is separate.
So let's just back up a little bit there. Where you've got year and year complete at those little gray bars at the top. Is that now just indicating and telling you, okay, now we have a full data set? You've basically cleaned everything up.
Yeah, as you can see, the year complete, there is no missing data anymore. So we don't even need this. We can drop this column if we want, or we can hide it from the analysis. Now let's go look. So my year and month is actually separate from the year. So I can click on the year and I can hold down my key, kind of like you're dealing with Excel. And let's see the suggestions Trifacta gives me. It's asking me to merge the columns, and that's what I want to do. I want to build an actual date, but I want my separator to be this. So I'm going to modify that, and I'm going to call this open ceremony clean. So now I have a clean open ceremony column. I can do the same thing for closing ceremony. As I see, it has the same logic, but instead of doing that, I can just reuse the code that I built. Duplicate the step, go ahead and just change our opening ceremony to closing ceremony and name this closing ceremony and clean.
Okay, so I guess just curious, why would we want to be gluing strings together to create dates like this? How is this going to be useful?
So I know we like went off the demo a little bit, but I wanted to answer this question that what was the longest Olympics ever? You know, I always had this question, how long Olympic takes? So let's do a date difference on these two. So I'm going to say.
Okay, so we're converting from strings and gluing columns together to create an actual timestamp, so we can actually do mathematical calculations.
Yes. So now I want to know, do a date difference on both of them and see how long each Olympic took. So let me go rename this one to time two. And you know, let's go sorted by biggest to smallest. And
so the longest
Olympics took 187 days in 1908. Yeah, and
so that was a really long. It was pretty much half the year to carry on the games. How long does the games take now?
We can go ahead and reverse or sort and see based on closing date. So
we're around 9 days. I'm just seeing some questions come through because we're a little bit ahead on our track today. So with regards to the fill, Misagh, we didn't have to sort by year. We actually used the source row number to do the sorting.
This is a built-in function in Trifacta that brings in the original source file row number. So we have a row number that shows you the sample, but also we show you where the sample is in the original file. So you see source row 34 is what is in Trifacta, but actually in Excel file, if I go and find that row, it's actually source row 41.
So if you have just bad data in general where this doesn't exist, you can use that as an index to then drive populating all the data. Okay, great. Now what about those? I mean, we've got a good date that we can use now, so it's an actual timestamp. What about those two columns with summer and winter ceremonies?
Yeah, that's ugly. I think we can fix that one too. So we did a merge on our date, but we can do a coalesce on these two columns. And coalesce is basically very similar to merge, but what is it saying is go look at my column number 1, and if there is any data, bring it. If there is none, go look at number 2 and bring the data. So now I'm going from 2 separate columns to 1 column that is showing me both seasons and months. So I'm going to call this season, but it's not as descriptive as a 1. So I can actually try to standardize this. So
it could be spring or summer. We wouldn't really know.
Yeah. So we can, well, with the standardization, you could, what Trifacta does, it brings in
summer.
Yeah, it brings in all the unique values in your data set, and it allows you to actually map it to whatever field you want. So we went from 2 rows to actually 1 season with winter and summer. this data set, to be honest, looks good to me at this point. Maybe I can go
So
ahead.
before we jump out of here, so just on the right-hand side there, you've got a history of everything that you've done. So is it possible to maybe jump back in time if you wanted to? So if you wanted to see what this looked like right at the start, can you jump back and they actually see what the data set looked like before you made those changes?
This is one of my favorite features, you know, the intuitiveness of what the data is. So imagine you're working with this data set and step 10, you're like, oh, I forgot to do this. No worries, I can jump between step 2 and 3 and even insert new steps between 2 and 3 and see what happens to the data. So it's really amazing. So let's go to our flow, and I think I'm happy with this recipe. So I'm going to call it a lookup recipe. And I want to join this to the applet events, and I want to bring in the country. So we said that we had the city, we wanted to bring in country. And I know my keys here would be the game, but the game also, I need to break it down. I cannot use it as is. So let's go ahead and try to first get rid of all these characters. So I'm going to try to get rid of all these characters because I don't need them. I don't know why the whole file has it. So another cool feature is like I, detected that this is happening in the whole file, and I know what to do with it based on Trifacta suggestions. Now I can go do it for all the columns in one step. And the preview is going to look something like this. So imagine if you have to work with a file or a table with 500, columns that you need to do this. So now it looks much better.
Yeah, doing that in SQL can be painful. Rolling through several hundred columns.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and try to split this column now that is clean. So we could use it as a key to join it to the other data set. And I want to split it based on delimiter, which is going to be the space in the middle. And you see, I'm going from one column and it tells me this column is going to be dropped, and it gives me a preview of 2 new columns that are going to be created. And I say, yes, let's go rename the game 1 to year and game 2 to season. And now I have 2 data sets ready to be joined. This is my favorite part, almost all the operations that I find as a data engineer, working with SQL, it's actually built in. So data set operations, unions, joins, they're all here. So I want to do left join, and I want to do it based on season and the year. So I'm going to choose year with the joint in data, year complete. And these are some that is really clean because neat functionality, because when I'm working with like really lots of data, sometimes I can, ask them to ignore white space, spatial characters and things like that. Another thing I wanted to join on so I can keep adding keys was the season. And I would say the same, just in case.
We never had that coalesce feature, then you would have had to have logic to say, okay, try and, use the 2 columns, and you would have patchy data sets.
Yeah. And now I can actually pick what I want in this data set. So I wanted to bring in the city, and we had the city. I wanted to bring in the country, the continent. So I'm going to do that, review, add to the data set.
Okay. Just while that is doing the join, we had another question come through, Misagh. For the join options, are only valid options shown in the drop-down box? So can you, for instance, is it static, or does it only show you what will actually work?
It actually shows you, but since you're working with the sample data, even though your join is correct, you might not get to see your join, so you have to pick a sample after. So it is live working based on your sample, but you can imagine if what you're joining is not in the sample, you have to pick a new sample and it shows. But yes, it actually works on the whole data set. So now I have this data, I can go ahead and try to do some analysis. We talked about the analysis of trying to figure out how many athletes were in each Olympics. So I want to know the year and the season. And here I want to know count of them. So it's all built in. So you actually saw so we could actually start without the season and see based on year. So now I have this aggregated data set. So we can try to sort it based on the year and see what's happening. And of course, like female athletes in 1896, 0 to 61. So you see the trend as it's going on to the point that, it's almost becoming equal. Yeah, so we went from 0 to many, many, many more. And now I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to show you, I don't have to stop there. I could branch out. I could actually keep adding more recipes and do different type of aggregates and different analysis as I'm working with this data set. And that's what I like about the flexibility of Trifacta itself. So this morning I was working with this data set that I had to separate applicant and co-applicant and join them to different tables and apply different logics to them. And at the end, I had to join them together and output it as one table. So I ended up doing all of that in one flow. So implemented the whole logic. So the flexibility of working with it is amazing.
So if you're in a team of people, you can say the data engineer can get the data into almost a baseline format that's ready for people to use, and then you can branch off with questions for specific teams, so people can actually put their own transforms on top of that, and then do whatever it is that they need to do with it.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Okay, brilliant. Thanks so much, Misagh. I think that's all we've got time for right now on the demo side. I think we're going to switch over to Q&A at this point because we've had a couple different questions coming in through the DMs, and we want to have some time just to roll through those before we wrap up. So the first one was, how does the work we do or we did in the demo relate to the modern data stack? So I think this one is a good one in that what's actually happening is here, we're just worrying about the application. We haven't had to deal with any infrastructure. We can connect into cloud data warehouses. Everything that we've built is natively scalable to use modern data stack technologies. So all that logic in the recipe that's been built, it can either be pushed down into something like Dataflow or EMR or into a cloud data warehouse like Snowflake or BigQuery to actually do the processing. So you don't actually have to do any conversion or anything like that.
I would also like to add to it. So I built data warehouses and centralized tools with, Snowflake, Fivetran. So I see Trifacta as a T when it comes to ELT, even though we have our connection. No, it enables the business people that know the data best to actually jump in and build these data sets for downstream analytics. So, E and L is more infrastructure compared to, for IT. And then when it comes to T, actually, you can involve your business people that know this data to sit with you and build this data sources for actually downstream analytics and machine learning and things like that. So Trifacta, I always see it as a T in ELT, and I personally was a customer of Trifacta and build system like that.
Great. So let's keep rolling because there are a couple more questions here. How do they get if they wanted a copy of the demo mapping that you created, can you actually share that with them?
Yes.
So if they wanted to do a trial, you can go and sign up for a trial, and then you could actually take this mapping.
Yes, so I can export this flow and I can share it with you. And I give you the zip file, and you would be able to actually go to your instance of Trifacta and import the zip file for yourself and work with the same flow. Another thing, what if you,
sorry. And what if they wanted to collaborate? Because there was another question about how could I collaborate with other people in my team on the same
flow. Question. So if you were actually in my instance, I could actually share this flow with you and I'll tell you if you can only run this flow or you can actually edit it and apply your own logic to it as well.
Okay, great. We've got time for one more question. This is a good one. You guys made it easy for yourselves. This is just a small CSV. What if I'm working with terabytes of data within a data warehouse? How does Trifacta scale and work well with large data sets? Okay, so I think something to be aware of with this is when Misagh is working with this, he's actually taking a sample of the source data. So he's not working with the full data set. It's actually just a sample that I think it taps out at about 10 megabytes. But you can resample as many times as you want, and you can also get specific and filter if you want to look at certain areas within your sample data set. And the idea is that you can do that exploration, you can build the transformations, you can build the recipe without having a situation where you have to see everything and do everything all at the same time. What then happens is that this is just the design time. When Misagh actually goes to the flow view and hits play and actually runs this as a job, what will happen is that it connects to the underlying data sources and it executes across the full data set when it does that. So it's definitely not something where you're doing it live with just the CSV or that sample data set. It gets translated into an actual job that then can be replicated or used in a schedule and works with massive amounts of data, not just the sample. So great question, thanks. I think that we've got one more that came in on the Q&A. The T in transformation is the lineage of the changes available to be moved into another application. So I guess something like a catalog, if you had a catalog tool or something like that, you can actually export that flow and you can share it with with something out there. And there's the Zoom dog right on time, just as we wrap up the meeting. So I think that's all we've got time for today, folks. In summary, we did look at data wrangling for cleaning up data and being able to explore things. In the next episode on November the 3rd, we're going to be getting more into marketing and sales data sets. So we're actually going to take some real specific marketing and sales scenarios and walk through how you would approach using Trifacta to work with those data sets. If you are curious about trying out Trifacta, you can go and sign up at trifacta.com for a free trial. We've got a 30-day window that you can play around with the technology, or you can reach out to us and we'll help you out with that. Great. Thanks so much, Misagh. Really appreciate the time. And thanks everyone for your attention today. Have a good one.